You're listening to the Visibly Fit podcast. Hey, I'm your host, Wendie Pett, and every week I'll give you holistic, practical solutions for everyday issues related to nutrition, healing, functional fitness, and behavior modifications. As a naturopath, fitness expert, and wellness coach for over 20 years, my goal is to empower you to reach for greater health and to rise up to your next level of living in mind, body, and spirit. You were created with greatness in mind. It's time to own it. Are you with me? Then let's dive in. Hello and welcome to the Visibly Fit podcast. I'm your host, Wendie Pett. This podcast is actually now a part of the Spark Media Network that can also be heard on the Edify app. So go check that out. Well, listen, if you are just tuning in for the first time ever to the Visibly Fit podcast, you will be blessed, beyond blessed, when you hear from my guest today, because maybe you have questions about, there's always kind of two camps, sometimes 3, 4 camps, depending on what you're hearing in the media or what you're reading regarding health, regarding diet, nutrition, exercise, you name it. There's always kind of 2 sides of the coin, right? And so I have an incredible guest that hopefully will get a few of your maybe head scratchers answered. But his name is James F. Loomis, Jr. He is an MD, MBA, received his medical degree from the University of Arkansas, where he was elected to the Alpha Omega Alpha Honor Medical Society. Say all that 5 times fast, and graduated with honors. Yes, he's a smart one. He subsequently completed his internship and residency in internal medicine at Barnes Hospital, Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri. And in addition to that, Dr. Loomis received an MBA from the Olin School of Business at Washington University in St. Louis. He is board certified in internal medicine, is a diplomat of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, and has also completed the certification program in plant-based nutrition from Cornell University. Loomis is also a fellow of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. Dr. Loomis has served as team internist for the St. Louis Rams football team and the St. Louis Cardinals baseball team, as well as tour physician for the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra. Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that one. He is currently the medical director at the Barnard Medical Center in Washington, D.C. And before coming to the Barnard Medical Center, he practiced internal medicine at St. Luke's Hospital in St. Louis, where he was also the director of prevention and wellness. He is on the clinical faculty of the Department of Internal Medicine at George Washington University School of Medicine in Washington, D.C., and the Department of Preventative Medicine at Biostatistics at the Uniformed Services University for Health Sciences at Bethesda, Maryland. Oh my goodness. I'm telling you, the list goes on and on. This guy is he's got a long list of massive resume here. He speaks internationally. We actually just got through talking about several of his travels, but he speaks internationally on the health benefits of a whole food plant-based diet and is featured in the documentary, my favorite one ever, The Game Changers. And when he is not practicing medicine, Dr. Loomis, he enjoys reading, cooking, teaching plant-based cooking classes, and he also enjoys hiking, running. He does lots of running, biking, and swimming, and has completed numerous half marathons, triathlons, and including an Ironman triathlon. I'm telling you, this guy, he's unstoppable. Welcome to Visibly Fit, Dr. Loomis. How are you? Gosh.
I'm doing great, Wendie. You're wearing me out with all that, right?
Seriously. Oh my goodness. I'm like, and then this, and then this. But you know what? You have put in the work, and you have helped so many people because of your willingness to dive in deeper and to learn more and to grow in this space. And so thank you.
Oh,
and
thank you.
for coming on the show and spending this time with us. We were just together just a couple weeks ago. Right here, I've got my little mug in my
Oh,
hand
yeah.
at the Healthy Retreat, the Whole Food Market Healthy Retreat in Tampa. And yeah, that was fun. That was a great week, helping and serving those people that were attending. And you were really teaching a lot on men's health this particular week. But I know you teach on several different topics. So I want to dive in first before we start, asking these questions that are looming over many people's heads. Like they hear this and then this, and they get very confused on what do I really do, because their doctor may tell them one thing and then they hear something else on the news. I want to hear your story. I mean, I know your story because we're friends, but I want people to know who you are and how you even got started in the whole food plant-based movement to begin with, because you have a
Oh, sure,
great
Wendy.
story.
Yeah, thank you. And it was fun last week. It's really amazing to see the transformation that many of the participants made, even in just a short time. I mean,
Yes.
it's really incredible.
Yeah.
So, and going to medical school, as you probably well know, we really don't learn anything about nutrition other than some glorified biochemistry, right? It was maybe a couple of hours, and we learned what a protein was and what a vitamin was, and then we learned all the diseases you get when you don't have enough of those things, right? But we didn't learn anything about lifestyle, food, meaningful, about exercise, et cetera, et cetera. And I was interested in nutrition, and I'd been a fairly active. I ran track in college, and I'd been a fairly successful road runner, marathoner, 10K during med school. So I was always interested in eating healthy, but what I thought was eating healthy at the time were things like low fat dairy and lean meat and plenty of fruits and vegetables and whole grains, and try not to eat too much ice cream, right?
Right.
And that's what I talked to my patients about. And so, in retrospect, part of the disconnect from that was, our brains are very good at moderating the trees, but we're not very good at seeing the forest, right? And what I mean by that is, Monday, the nurses might bring cookies in the office, and Tuesday I might have a donut in the doctor's lounge, and Wednesday I might go out for a cheeseburger, and Thursday it's someone's birthday and have cake and ice cream. But then Friday comes around and I'm thinking, wow, I ate really healthy this week. I only had cookies once, right? So not recognizing that a lot of little bad choices are bad choices. And about 10 years ago, I was playing with my dog and I tore the meniscus in my knee. And I was really busy, and I had to wait a few months to get surgery. And so I couldn't move, couldn't exercise. And I started to gain weight because, again, you come to find out you literally can't outrun a mediocre diet, despite what you may hear, right?
No.
And then I had the surgery done finally. And because my leg had gotten weak from not using it, I didn't do the rehab because doctors are terrible patients, right? And so I gained more weight. And next thing you know, I actually developed atrial fibrillation, which is a fairly serious irregular heart rhythm. And it turns out the reason I had atrial fibrillation is I had developed sleep apnea, which is a condition associated with oftentimes with weight gain, where I literally stop breathing at night, and that causes oxygen in your blood to drop low. And that was triggering the heart rate, irregular heart rhythm. So that finally motivated me to go see my internist, my primary care doctor. Well, my cholesterol was through the roof. I had borderline diabetes. I had borderline blood pressure. I had already suffered lifelong allergies and asthma. So I'm collecting doctors in St. Louis, and these are friends of mine, literally world-class physicians, some of the smartest people I know. And they're treating me exactly like I treat all my patients, right? So I'm on pills for my heart. I'm on a really sexy CPAP machine to wear at night. Yeah. I'm, on pills for my cholesterol. I'm headed toward diabetes, on and on and on. And I was kind of lost because I'm like, I know this isn't right, but I don't know what the answer is, right? So I'm just kind of muddling through. And one day I was laying on the couch, flipping through Netflix, and I saw Forks Over Knives, the documentary about using food as medicine. And, I knew what I'd heard of a vegan, right?
Sure.
But to me, my perception of that was someone who, ate granola and hugged trees and wore Birkenstocks and et cetera. And it wasn't my gig. But really the idea of using food as medicine, I was like, wow, that makes so much sense. Went back to the office next day. I was on the faculty at WashU at the time, got on the library website, looked at some of the primary research that afternoon. And next day, I told my significant other at the time, I said, I want to do this plant-based diet and see what happens. So made a commitment, not only to go on a plant-based diet, but also to rehab my knee, which I really hadn't done. I was about 3 or 4 months post-op. That was in July 2011. Well, in 4 months, without really any change in physical activity other than knee rehab, I lost almost 50 pounds. My cholesterol dropped 100 points. My sleep apnea went away. The AFib went away. My lifelong allergies went away, off all meds, et cetera, et cetera. It was nothing short of miraculous. And, I could exercise again. It is. Yeah. I could exercise again. And, as you know, the story goes on. I actually, to celebrate my 60th birthday a few years ago, I'll be 63 years shortly in a couple months. I did a full Ironman triathlon, and I'm not suggesting people need to be doing an Ironman triathlon to be healthy, but what I am suggesting, when we can truly find balance between our physical health through movement, our emotional health through stress management and sleep, and our nutritional health through, at a minimum, a plant-strong diet, our bodies are capable of remarkable things. And we do so many things to get in our own way of our own health.
Yeah, no, you're so right. And I'm so glad, first of all, that you're on, because first of all, I mean, you're a doctor. You're like, everyone counts on what their doctor tells them. And so the fact that you yourself had this revelation as someone that was prescribing people meds all the time, and you were being prescribed meds, it just speaks volume. And so I'm just so thrilled that you're sharing your story. So thank you, because it is miraculous, and yet it's not. Like, that's how God intended it. Right. That's how he intended it, for us to eat the foods that he's provided, and our bodies will heal.
Right. Well, so it's interesting because as I was trying to educate myself even further, as I was going through these really dramatic changes in my own personal health, I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, why is a plant-based diet so powerful? Why is exercise so powerful? I really did a deep dive into all this. And what I realized was we make healthy living way too complicated.
Yes,
right?
we do.
Because if you think about human physiology, human behavior, human nutritional needs, human stress response, human sleep needs, kind of through the lens of our evolutionary biology, right? And ask the simple question, as human beings, what did we evolve to do?
Right.
Well, like any living creature, all those things evolved to facilitate us living long enough to find a mate and pass on our DNA. And again, that's true for any living creature. And so for most of human history, the two primary tasks we had to be able to accomplish for that to occur was the ability to find food when we're starving and try not to be someone else's food when they're starving.
Right.
That was where our stress came from. And we had to respond to that stress through physical activity. So again, we evolved to be physically active. You look at the biomechanics of your feet and ankles, our cardiorespiratory physiology, our metabolism, nutrition, and even our stress response, right? We have adrenaline to get us ready to perform activity, cortisol to help us recover. And assuming we survived, that's when we'd rest, recover, and refuel. And we refuel with whatever we can find around us on a given day, which was mostly unrefined plants, right? We didn't have dairy products because we hadn't domesticated other mammals yet. We did eat meat, it just wasn't very much. And it came from wild animals, not what's now become processed food. And that cycle of stress, activity, recovery, that's how we built resilience. That's how you get stronger and faster and smarter and can do more things. All is good. No, let's fast forward to the modern world. Most of us don't do any of that, right?
And the stress, the cortisol is being released like crazy because people's adrenalines.
Right. Well, that's exactly right. We don't have to spend energy to get energy, right? We've got Uber Eats, Instacart, grocery stores, restaurants. The kinds of energy and nutrients we consume bears little to no resemblance to what we're supposed to be eating. To your point, we're not running and fighting physically anymore. We're running and fighting emotionally. Most of us aren't worried about starving by leopards. We're worried about jobs and money and relationships and family and COVID and politics, etc. On and on. And then we compound it by not
know the difference.
That's exactly right. So and then we don't recover from the stress because we can't sleep at night because our mind's racing around from all that extra adrenaline. And so on and on and on. So that's the reason why the key to being healthful, leading a healthful life, is to replicate the lifestyle we are designed to lead. So what does that mean?
Really
we need to move around 30 to 60 minutes most days. A couple of days a week, we need to replicate picking stuff up, moving it out of the way. And a quick comment about that is, again, something I was in Saudi Arabia recently speaking at a conference, and I kind of did a deeper dive into physical activity. And this is such a simple concept, but it was eye-opening when I really started thinking about it. As I mentioned a minute ago, we evolved. We had to be physically active to survive. It wasn't something we decided to do. If you didn't hunt and gather food, or you didn't run away from leopards, you didn't last very long, right?
Or, yeah, right.
Well, now, as I said a minute ago, we don't have to do that anymore, right? So physical activity in many ways has devolved into what we now call exercise, where it's become a discrete event, right? We feel like we have to put on special clothes and go to a special place and do a special thing, starts and stops. We tend to that or nothing.
People treat it like a curse word, right?
Right, that's right, that's right. And no, exactly. And so not recognizing there's lots of ways to incorporate physical activity into your daily routine, which may not involve exercise. I mean, think about it. How would you explain to your great-great-great-grandfather that because we sit around in front of a computer all day, that you pay money to go to a place you really don't want to go, wear clothes you really don't want to wear, and get on machines you really don't want to get on without sounding like you're insane, right? And that's what exercise has become in the modern world.
Absolutely.
Right. And, then we need to refuel ourselves with mostly plants, and we need to get a good night's sleep and not stress out and not drink too much and not smoke. And that's the key.
It's really simple. It is, Jim, but we make it more difficult. And obviously, with the addictive nature of most foods that are processed, it's sometimes not their fault, kind of a thing.
Oh, that's right. Oh, that's exactly right.
So, but let's go back to what you first said when we started the conversation. You were kind of talking about you were eating a cookie in moderation and having this and having that and thinking, it wasn't so bad. I think that's how the majority of people think. I eat pretty healthy. Well, I always tell my patients that moderation kills momentum, but moderation kills more than momentum, right? So some people think, "Ooh, what's the big deal? I'll have a cheat meal or I have a cheat day." What's your take on that?
Well, so here's the problem with that, and it has to do with the way our brains are designed. Dr. Doug Lisle talked a little bit about this last week. I think it's the same idea, just framed a little bit differently.
Yeah.
What makes this so hard for most people is something we don't talk about. I'm talking about behavior change, eating healthier. And it's a simple fact. Eating is a learned behavior. Yes. And once you learn it, you stop thinking about it. And that's by evolutionary design as well. I mean, think about walking. If you had to think about walking, contract my quad, flex my hip, bend my knee, you would have walked right past the ripe berries. You wouldn't have seen the leopard. You wouldn't have lasted very long, right? So our brains evolved a mechanism when we habituate a task, whether it be walking, eating, in the modern world, even driving. Very quickly, our subconscious brain takes over. And that's to allow our conscious brain to scan the environment for opportunities and threats. So with food, all the foods you like, the foods you don't like, triggers to stop eating, triggers to stop eating. That stuff you learned a long time ago, and then we stopped thinking about it. I mean, think about white bread, right? White bread's not very healthy.
Oh my gosh. You remember that Wonder Bread that you would take away from the crust and make into a ball?
Yeah, exactly. So if the environmental trigger you learn to eat white bread is the waiter dumping that basket on the table at the restaurant. Yeah. At that moment in time, you don't have to think about eating the bread. You have to think about not eating the bread. And if you're tired of thinking, you don't have any more willpower left, and you're tired of thinking, a busy day. Exactly. And there's nothing you can do about it. Nothing you can do about it, because that is the way our brains work. And so that's one of the problems with moderation, because so many of our subconscious choices occur outside of our conscious work. We don't even know what we're moderating half the time, right? Because what happens is patients come in and they say, "Oh, Doc, I'm doing this plant-based thing, and my blood sugars aren't much better, and I don't understand." So I asked them, "What'd you have for dinner last night?" "Oh, we went to a nice restaurant. I had a quinoa kale salad. It was really healthy." But what's not on the list? The 4 or 5 pieces of bread that's slathered in olive oil, waiting for the food to get there, because it's subconscious and it occurred outside of our conscious awareness. Now you can change that.
Yes, you can.
But it's hard, right? And so driving is another example. Yeah. No, well, so driving is another example of something we do without thinking, right?
Which is a scary thought if you think about it.
Right. But you don't put on your blinker, and you don't think about putting on your blinker and your brake, but there's a reason for that, right? That's to allow our conscious brain to not be preoccupied with every time you have to tap the brake, so you can scan the environment for opportunity and threat, for cars running red light, right? So what would happen tomorrow if you moved to London and you want to drive a car? You'd have to learn how to drive.
It's on the other side. Yeah.
Exactly.
A different way.
Right. And it would take you 3 to 6 months. Every time you get in that car, you got to be mindful of what side of the road am I on? What side of the pedestrians come through the crosswalk? How am I going through the roundabout? And then one day it might be 3 months, might be 6 months. You get in the car, and guess what? That's how you drive, right? Now, if someone said, "Do you miss driving on that other side of the road?" You'd say, "Well, that's a silly question because I don't drive that way anymore." So really what this is about, it's about teaching yourself to drive on a different side of the road nutritionally, right?
I love that.
And by the
Good.
way, you wouldn't drive on the wrong side of the road in moderation, now would you? Because
Exactly.
you would
Go,
only have a
Jim.
moderate number
See,
of head-on collisions and run over a moderate number of pedestrians. Every time you eat that ice cream, every time you eat that piece of bacon, every time you eat that cheeseburger, every time you eat that cookie, you are running over the endothelial lining of your blood vessels. You're running over your prostate cells, your colon cells, your breast cells, et cetera, your pancreas, et cetera, et cetera. So
give me a virtual high five, please.
yeah.
Because come on. This is something that I share all the time, but I needed someone else, the listeners, to hear it from a doctor.
Yeah.
Not just a naturopath. I need someone to stand with me on this. So thank you. That's perfect. I love that analogy. That's so cool.
Right.
All right. So I've got several questions because I get these questions all the time myself. So the first one we're going to tap into, because a lot of people say, well, with brain health and, with Alzheimer's and dementia, I've been really told that I need to have MCT oil and I need to add that.
Right.
So what's your take on MCT oil?
So where did the omega-3 fatty acids in salmon, for example, or fish oil, where did that come from? It came from what the fish ate, right?
Came from the fish ate,
came
right?
From where, yeah. Where? So if you follow the food chain, where does it ultimately come from marine phytoplankton and algae, which is plants, right?
Right.
So in fact, all these fishy, fatty fishes are just serving as the middleman. Yet you are correct. We do need omega-3s
correct
for brain health, right?
And for good skin.
Yeah,
we
exactly.
talked about
Exactly. But when we try to get it artificially through fish oil or MCT oil and all that, what ends up happening is, that this is an example of what T. Colin Campbell calls nutritional reductionism, right? We stop talking about food and we start talking about what food's made out of, right? And so when we get our omega-3s from hemp seeds or flax seeds or chia seeds, what else do we get in addition to those healthy, medium chain triglycerides and omega-3s? What else do we get?
You're getting fiber,
we get protein.
Fat.
Exactly. Yep. So I'm very much a minimalist.
Yes.
When it comes to supplements. Now, that being said, I think there is a role for omega-3 supplements.
Sure.
I think athletes probably reasonable. Anyone that suffers from any kind of chronic inflammatory disease, probably reasonable. If you're really concerned about brain health, it's a kind of a complicated physiology. That the key here really, it's not necessarily, so the key here is to balance your omega-6 intake with your omega-3.
Right.
So omega-6s are inflammatory, omega-3s are anti-inflammatory. It's felt so 6s are inflammatory, omega-3s are anti-inflammatory. It's felt the optimum dietary ratio is in the 3-to-1 range, less than 5-to-1, probably 2 to 3-to-1. Standard Western diet, 60-to-1, somewhere in there. An unhealthy vegan diet with a lot of edible oils, 20, 30-to-1. And the problem is, when we overconsume omega-6s, we create this inflammatory milieu within inside ourselves. Now, you might say, well, why don't I just take some fish oil or MCT oil or whatever to bring that ratio back into balance? Well, first of all, if your ratio is 10-to-1, the amount of fish oil you'd have to take is a lot.
Right.
But more importantly, we can't convert it. When we're taking in too much omega-6, we can't convert the omega-3s to the prostaglandins, the ALA and all that, the precursors to the anti-inflammatory compounds. So you have to not only get your omega-6 level intake down, and that's mainly meat and dairy, but even edible oils, olive oil, for example, 16 to 3, somewhere in there. But you also have to increase your omega-3. So now if you're really good, if you follow a strict no oil plant-based diet, then you can probably get by without the omega-3s. But most people find that very, very, oils are so ubiquitous in our food today. That's very difficult to do if you go out to restaurants and things like that. So there is a role for small doses of omega-3s. Yeah,
they're in just about everything. You have to really look and read the ingredient label to avoid it and just make your own Whole Foods, and then you don't have to,
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right.
whole food, veggie burgers, bean burgers, that kind of thing. But
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
thank you for answering that, because that's one that I get a lot, and that's wonderfully stated. Now, here's another question, of course, that I get a lot, and it's because marketing is, fantastic right now around the ketogenic diet. What's your take on the ketogenic lifestyle?
Well, so let's back up for a minute and say,
Mm-hmm.
so why did our brains evolved to use glucose as
Yep.
fuel, right? And we can't store glucose in our brain, so we have to rely on glucose in our blood to maintain enough energy for our brains to function. Our brains are energy hogs. They use a lot, despite there's a huge mismatch between how much space our brains take up and how much energy they use. And the major source of stored glucose for the brain is primarily liver. We also store glycogen in our muscles. That's primarily for exercise. We use the liver, though, as kind of this glucose sink to keep our brain supplied. So when we start to starve to death, when we run out of food, right, we will keep using this glucose, this glycogen, and eventually, over time, that it'll run out, right?
Right, right.
And so our brains evolved a mechanism as a last stand, the last ditch effort to keep going, to find more food before you starve, the ability to burn ketone bodies as the last kind of, again, last stand before you die. And ketone bodies are generated by the breakdown of our own muscle cells primarily, right? So we can start to break down when we run out of glycogen. We can break down the protein in our muscles, and that creates ketone bodies. So the original ketogenic diet was starvation, right? So
it was unintentional. It was an unintentional
right. It was
diet.
It was the last ditch effort, right?
Right.
So the idea that we should create a ketotic state through dietary manipulation doesn't make any sense at all.
No.
And there may be some benefit to intermittent fasting. So there's nothing wrong with getting a little ketotic during a fast. And there may be, that's a whole different, the whole idea about intermittent fasting, that's another whole hour
that's
talk.
a whole nother podcast.
Right.
We'll do that another time.
Yeah. But there may be some advantage to that. But trying to create a ketotic state by dietary manipulation causes a whole host of downstream problems. The high protein that you need to consume has been linked with almost across the board with increased risk for cancer. The high fat that you have to consume has been increased with, it raises your cholesterol, increased risk for heart disease, on and on and on.
But people are just looking at the short term, not the long game.
Exactly. That is exactly right. And so what's interesting is, though, it's kind of, it's kind of gained some favor in the diabetes community. Right. So there is research that if you go on a ketogenic diet, your sugars will get better. And that's true. But let me explain why, because I think this is important. And this explain why the longer term benefits of a ketogenic diet are not so good. So, most doctors, so the way I think about type 2 diabetes is the way, think about your kitchen sink, right? So imagine this morning you walked into your kitchen and the drain was clogged and left the water on, okay? And the water's overflowing onto the floor. So how do you fix it? You get out a mop up the water. You might need another mop. You might need a third mop. You finally get all the water up. You put your mops away. Well, guess what? When you come back this afternoon, tomorrow morning, you got to get the mops back out because you haven't really fixed the problem. Well, that's exactly how most doctors are taught to treat type 2 diabetes, right? We get out of sugars on the floor. We get out metformin mop, add a Januvia mop, get an insulin mop, put the mops away. Right. But that's not the problem, right? The problem is that the drain's clogged and the water, you left the water on. So what's clogging the drain? Well, it's actually fat, which is deposited in those muscle and liver cells, which has made them resistant to insulin. Insulin is how we get the sugar into the muscle and liver cells to store as glycogen that we talked about a minute ago. The water is all the processed sugar and processed grains and all that, which is driving the need for insulin, right? So that's exactly why a very high fiber, low fat diet plus a little exercise is such a powerful tool in the treatment, prevention, and reversal of type 2 diabetes, okay? Now, ketogenic diet, your sugars get better, but why? Because you've turned off the water. But in fact, you are clogging the drain worse when you go on a ketogenic diet. And when most people can't sustain a ketogenic diet for very long because it makes you feel terrible, you get nauseated and on and on.
Right.
So when you refeed after a ketogenic diet, do you think your insulin resistance gets better or worse? It's
Oh,
worse.
definitely worse. Yeah.
Right. So that's why a ketogenic diet is not the long-term solution to any medical issue, including type 2 diabetes.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, and some people that go on it aren't diabetic at all. They're just after that
Oh, right.
quick fix of losing weight,
Right.
right? It's not,
Right.
yeah. So that's kind of interesting. Okay. Well, I'm glad we touched on that. And then the other thing that I hear often whenever I put my patients on whole food plant-based is, oh, lectins. There's a few people out there really talking about lectins, and that's the carbohydrate that binds proteins, and how that's really not good to consume. And so what's your take on that?
Well, so the people claim lectins are anti-nutrients because that phytates are another one, same thing. They
Right.
they bind to nutrients and prevent their absorption. So plant-based foods, especially legumes, do have a fair number of phytates and lectins and things like that. But when you cook beans, for example,
Yeah.
guess what? The lectins and phytates go away. And when was the last time you ate a raw dried bean? I mean, you don't, right?
Well,
And
unless you
and
broke
and
a
so,
tooth.
yeah, right, exactly. So there is absolutely no scientific evidence that I'm aware of that
Right.
that in any way, shape, or form, lectins and phytates have some adverse effect on your health. I mean, you look at the blue zone data. So, as you know, the blue zones, right? So
Yeah. Dan.
6 or 7 communities around the world, exceptional longevity. So it's places like Ikara in Greece and the Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica and Okinawa and Sardinia in Italy. And interestingly enough, Loma Linda, California, which is kind of an outlier, which is interesting. But if you do a Venn diagram about what's common about those communities,
Yeah.
plant predominant diet, legumes is the primary source of
Yeah.
legumes is the primary source of protein. They're physically active. They don't smoke. They have strong family and social and spiritual connections. And so it doesn't make sense to me if somehow lectins were bad, that they would be the primary source of protein for these blue zone communities, right?
Right.
I've been plant-based for 10 years, 11 years now.
Yeah.
I run, swim, bike, did an Ironman. I'm not nutrient deficient, I can promise you.
Right. No, that's so good. But people are seeing the studies, they're seeing the marketing with that and with keto diet. And so it's very confusing for people
Right.
when they're seeing that pop up on their, social media feed, or
right.
in their email news, in their
Yeah.
emails. So, I just kind of want to clear that up for everybody. So that's good.
Yeah.
All
Sure.
right. So when we were at the healthy retreat, working together there on the team, you spoke a little bit about beets, and I'm going to bring that up and let you talk about beets. Definitely, the men will want to perk their ears up on this one, but but maybe the women want to know this too, and they'll start serving their men beets.
So I first discovered the power of beets by listening to Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn.
Yeah.
So Dr. Esselstyn, as you know, is a very prominent physician, one of the leaders, if you will, in the plant-based community. And he's done a lot of work with people with heart disease. And so one of the first things that happens when people get heart disease is they start to have what's called endothelial dysfunction. So the endothelium is the single cell lining of the blood vessel, and it controls the blood vessel's ability to contract and dilate. And it turns out that nitric oxide is a very potent stimulator of the endothelium to help maintain endothelial function. So when we have lots of nitrates around, nitric oxide, that will let the blood vessel dilate when it's supposed to and constrict when it's supposed to. And when it can't do that, that can damage the endothelium and things like that. So, there were some studies there's been numerous studies looking at the effect of beets on athletic performance, because obviously if you can deliver more blood flow to the muscles, then you're going to be able to go longer and faster and such, and recover faster because you're washing things out. And there's evidence actually that beets may increase endurance performance. Beet loading may actually increase endurance performance by 10 to 20%, believe it or not. That's pretty significant.
Wow, that is.
Well, one of the other areas where we need, endothelial function is in men is erectile function, right?
Right.
And in fact, it's been shown now, it's well established now that erectile dysfunction is actually the canary in the coal mine for heart disease, because the penile arteries, this big,
Tiny.
the coronary arteries this big.
Mm-hmm.
So if you get a 50% blockage in this artery, you're going to be symptomatic. You can't get that blood flow in. Where a 50% blockage in this artery, you don't know it yet, right?
That's a good word. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm,
So that's a case where size does matter. The size of the blood vessel. But
size of the blood vessel.
Yeah, but that's where so there's a lot of evidence that beets can help improve. It's like nature's Viagra. There are other foods, arugula and kale, rhubarb, all have high levels of nitrates, but it's very interesting. Nature's a wonderful thing. The way we're designed, it's not like we need to eat one food or do one thing to lower your risk for heart disease, and another thing to improve your sexual function, another thing to not get diabetes, another thing to manage your weight, another thing for brain health. It's all the same stuff, right?
Yeah, it is.
Which is the amazing thing. I mean, we oftentimes practice health reductionism, right? We treat erectile dysfunction with, think about it. Here's another way to frame all this. If you were on blood pressure pills or cholesterol pills or Viagra or whatever, right? And you were having a side effect of one of those medicines, would you want me as your doctor to give you another drug to treat the side effect? Of course not.
Absolutely not. But
you want me to change but you want me to change the medicine, right?
Oh, that's what most people would want you to do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Every single one of those drugs is treating the side effect of the most powerful medicine you have to take, which is the food that you eat. So instead of giving Viagra for erectile dysfunction, which is a side effect of the food, why don't we change the medicine, change the food? Instead of giving metformin to treat type 2 diabetes, which is a side effect of the food, why don't we change the food?
Eat
right?
beets. Turn the beet around.
On and on. No, on and on and on, right?
Yeah.
And so it really is that simple.
It is. It is. I think. Okay, so let's talk about that, because it really is simple. And yes, I've been whole food plant-based for a decade myself. And so I know that people going into it don't see it as it being so simple. They think it's really hard to do. So what would you say the biggest hidden pitfall that most people or some people experience with going on a whole food plant-based lifestyle is, especially with your patients that you work with?
Yeah. So first of all, I think there's a lot of confusion these days, in particular, because as the interest in plant-based foods have gone up, there's a lot of conflation these days between vegan foods and plant-based foods.
Yeah, right.
And veganism comes from a place of compassion, which is important. Certainly something I wasn't aware of. I think we all have cognitive dissonance around our food and where it really comes from. So a lot of so it's about compassion. So don't harm other creatures. So don't eat them, don't wear them, don't use products tested on them. Unfortunately, there's a lot of really unhealthy food that's vegan, right? White flour is vegan, sugar's vegan, Oreos are vegan. And a good example, vegan ice cream, vegan cupcakes.
And all the new
exactly
meats that are
plant-based
coming
burgers,
out.
exactly.
Plant-based meat, yeah.
So Impossible burgers are better for the cow. They're better for the environment. They're a little bit better for you compared to a hamburger, but in no way, shape, or form are they a health food. So I have a lot of patients who get tripped up in this kind of vegan, where they perceive that, if it's vegan, it must be healthy. And so that I have to kind of dispel that pretty quickly.
Yeah. Oreos are vegan.
No, that's right. That's right. And so that's one thing, is just understanding exactly what a whole food plant-based diet is.
Right.
And I think the other thing, it's certainly much easier now than it was.
Yeah.
Because
it's becoming popular for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And, you can go to most any restaurant and find some option that's not, steamed white rice and limp carrots or something, which is what, you go and ask for vegetarian meal in the past. So that's helpful. There's a lot of great cooking channels, and, our friend Karen.
Yes.
Has
you guys are Chef in the Doc, right? Chef and Doc on YouTube.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. We're coming out. It's coming soon.
Cool.
So, but it's very accessible now, educating yourself. So I think that's part of it. There are some people will experience some transient GI upset. It's very common. And again, you don't go into the gym and start lifting. If you're just getting started in the gym, you don't put 200 pounds on the dumbbell and start to lift. You ease your way into it.
It's going to take a
It's
while
the
for the
same
gut
thing.
microbiome to catch up.
Exactly. So you start out, kind of ease yourself into it, and this is a journey, this is not the end. It's a journey, right?
Yeah.
And so every bite of food you put in your mouth that's more healthful than yesterday is a step in the right direction.
That's right.
So,
that's encouraging.
So that's what I tell patients. It's just, one day at a time, and just, try to make healthier choices. Start out by taking, cut back to one meat-based meal a day, or one meat-based meal every couple of days, or, meatless Mondays or whatever. And slowly but surely replace foods that are less helpful with those that are more helpful. Get your pantry cleaned out. Start thinking about what you're going to do. And then the other thing is, gets back to what we talked about in the very beginning. So many of our food behaviors are driven by these subconscious cues and environmental cues, but emotional cues play a very strong role in all this. And so, many of us turn to food for emotional comfort, and it's sugar that typically gives us that. And there's reason for that, if we evolved to prefer things that are sugary. And one of the reasons it's postulated is that if it was sweet, it probably wasn't poisonous. And so our brains evolved the mechanism when we think about, because if it's bitter, the alkaloids in food that make them bitter are actually the plant's mechanisms to protect them from predators, right?
Sure.
And so our brains evolved a mechanism. When we anticipate something sweet, we actually secrete dopamine in our brains, and which makes us crave that or want that. We also crave things that are fatty, right? And again, this evolved in a world of calorie scarcity, right?
Right.
So every gram of fat has 9 calories compared to 4 calories for carbohydrate or protein. So if I'm trying to get as many calories as I can to survive till tomorrow, every gram of food that I can find that's fat as opposed to carbohydrate and protein is twice as many calories. So I'm twice as likely to live till tomorrow, right? We have a inborn preference to spend as little energy as possible to get more energy, because if I need 1,000 calories to survive tomorrow and I don't have to spend any energy, I only have to find 1,000 calories. If I have to spend 1,000 to get to 1,000, I got to find 2,000, right? So think about what that means in the modern world. It means the drive-through at Krispy Kreme is the most highly evolved energy source on the planet. And you already mentioned these food companies know that, and we're surrounded by these choices. We've learned these bad choices. And so really addressing some of the emotional components of eating is very, very important if you're going to have long-term success. Stress eating is normal, right? Yeah. So when we suffer stress, we have adrenaline to get us ready to perform activity. But cortisol's job is to help us recover. That's why we give cortisone shots. But it also can stimulate our appetite, and preferentially store what we eat is belly fat, because it's trying to help you refill the gas tank before you fight the next leopard. But when we're doing that emotionally, not physically, we never empty the gas tank. So stress eating is a normal response to stress. There's nothing wrong with stress eating, but understanding that and not beating yourself up and finding alternatives to eat when you feel stressed out, that's the key here, right? So it's really connecting again, it's understanding what's driving you to eat certain foods, whether they're learned behaviors that you need to relearn, whether it's learned behaviors around the environment, around emotions that are driving you to make these choices. So when you educate yourself and learn about that, it makes it much easier to understand when you slip up and things don't go well, that understand why, so you can make a better choice the next day. But again, as I said earlier, it's only hard for 3 to 6 months. After that,
I would say just a couple weeks. Your taste buds, your palate starts to change. I mean,
so it's the emotional eating. Yeah, it's the emotional eating part that takes that 3 to 6 months. And so,
neurological the grooves, right?
Right.
In the brain.
Right.
So, okay, what about, do you ever work with patients that are like, okay, Dr. Loomis, I'm on board. I want to get on this whole food, plant-based lifestyle, but I want to gain weight. Like I'm tiny. I don't want to lose weight. I'm not in that place. Have you ever worked with anyone?
Sure. Yeah. We see this in athletes. We see this a lot in athletes too, who don't want to lose weight, right? And they go on a plant-based and they lose weight, and it's the opposite of what they want.
Right.
So there are ways to maintain and gain weight healthfully. you just have to be a little bit careful because you don't want to overconsume fat.
Right.
I think you can certainly be a little more liberal with things like nuts and things like that, avocados, as you're trying to increase your weight. So for many of those folks, it really involves, you have to be pretty diligent about, because as you know, whole food plant-based foods are highly, they're very nutrient dense, right? So there are lots of fiber and you get full, right? So sometimes
so it's
it's
hard
literally
to eat a lot.
exactly. So for those people, and I had trouble when I was training for Ironman toward the end, because I was exercising 2 to 3 hours every single day and 6 to 8 hours on the weekend every day, right?
Wow.
I'm burning 4,000 or 5,000 calories a day. And I was having trouble toward the end, kind of keeping on the weight that I need to do. So, lots of snacks. I used a lot of like pretzel filled peanut butter. I used, I did a lot of smoothies, snacks, things, had smoothies in between meals, things like that. Had a bowl of fruit on my desk, ate a lot of hummus, kept that around. So I set myself up where I had healthful snacks. They were maybe a little bit more high calorie, but nothing crazy. I didn't put olive oil on everything, and I didn't eat fried foods. It was all healthful. But
you were eating more often, obviously, not
more
just
often, right? That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And I think that's the key, really, is fine. Yeah. And again, I think you can be a little bit more liberal with nut butters and nuts and avocados. Those are the ones that are really going to give you more bang for your buck. Now, now obviously you've got really high cholesterol or type 2 diabetes. It's a little more delicate line to walk, but it's certainly manageable. And sometimes I would have patients track things using something like Chronometer or MyFitnessPal or Lose It, just to get a feel for exactly how many calories they were burning and how many calories they need, so we can create. And we have dietitians actually work with in the practice who are plant-based, and our dietitian now, Karen Smith, is actually a very accomplished marathon runner. So she's in tune with all that. And so, I oftentimes I just refer them to see her to help her put together a meal plan, if you will. Yeah.
That's great. Well, because some people are just serious calorie burners. Like they're thinking, I do not want to lose any more weight and I want to gain muscle. And actually my husband's one of them. I mean, he burns through the calories in a day, even just mental space. He burns through those calories. So that's good news. Okay. Let's just kind of end this interview with something fun. What's something you'd like to share with my audience that maybe not too many people know about you? It's, I don't know. Do you play an instrument?
No, I don't play an instrument.
Do you want to?
No, I'd love to play an instrument. I think some people are musically gifted.
Yeah.
I happen to be musically challenged. I like music, but I can't play. I did take up an interesting hobby over the thing. I started collecting stamps.
Oh, did you really?
I did. I've always loved geography and history. And during the pandemic, I knew I needed to get a hobby because, just stuck here in the apartment all the time. And, I wasn't going to the office, and I used to collect stamps. So I started collecting stamps, and that's been fun. That really helps me. I put my phone away about 8 o'clock, put it in the drawer, put on a little music, get out look at the stamps, learn about them, read about them. So that's great. The other thing I love to do, by the way, is that I took up when I moved to DC is I love to cook. So I teach plant-based cooking classes. I did that actually on my own, and now I do mostly with Karen. But I took up foraging, actually.
And that's Karen Dugan, by the way, that I had on Karen the podcast.
Dugan, yes, from the Center for Plant-Based Living. So I took up foraging, and so there is so much knowledge we are losing about wild foods that people have no idea about, and things like purslane. Purslane is, you probably have seen it, and it looks, you think it's a weed. More vitamin C, more nutrients than spinach, right?
Oh my gosh, I have to tell you a story about that really quick, because my husband and we were out hiking Yellowstone area, and we stopped somewhere, and we were kind of just depleted in energy, and the guy's like, hey, go get yourself some purslane. So man, we were chomping on that, and it was great. You can find it a lot of times. They're around like stop signs and weird places, but they look like weeds.
So now when I walk, people see weeds, I see food, right?
Oh, that's so good.
Yes. And so I've discovered a lot of really amazing foods that I like to play around with. So around here, in the fall, I mean, in the late summer, August, September, you can find pawpaws, right? So pawpaws are the largest indigenous fruit in the United States, and they look like little mangoes, and they taste kind of like they taste like a combination of kind of a peach mango, right? And the reason you don't see them in the reason you don't see them in the farmers markets is because they once they're ripe, they're ripe and they don't last very long. You got to eat them pretty quick, right?
Kind of like an avocado.
Yeah,
You better
right,
eat it
exactly.
quick.
So they grow along streams typically, the riparian that's called. And so down along the Potomac, there's these huge. I mean, literally, you could go gather 20 pounds of pawpaws. So I make pawpaw ice cream.
What? Really?
Yeah. So I take the pawpaws and a little light coconut milk and a little bit of vanilla and a little bit of maple syrup and some cinnamon, and I put it in the food processor. I take the pulp from the pawpaw, and I freeze it. Okay. I harvest it and freeze it, and then I throw it in a Vitamix and make pawpaw ice cream. Oh yeah. So I play around. So now in fact, I'm going on a foraging hike this weekend.
That is so cool. We get morel mushrooms behind our house.
Yeah. So that's the morels are we're a little bit out of morel season here, but chanterelles will be coming up, and oysters and black trumpets and things like that. So that's probably the most fun thing I like to do on the weekends is go foraging for wild food. And I usually take classes. Cool. You have to kind of know what you're doing. And I'm not
you don't want to get
expert.
The poisonous.
Right. All mushrooms are edible at least once. Yes. But I have there's a great guy here named Matt Cohen here in the DC area that runs Matt's Habitats, and he runs, small group,
I've heard of him actually.
Yes. Small group, foraging hikes, and I just signed up for one on Sunday. So
oh my goodness,
that's a lot of fun.
Totally be into that. Yes.
Yeah, and I come home with these bags of like mulberries and American persimmons and mushrooms and stuff, again, chickweed and goose.
Hey, do you ever drink pine needle tea? We do.
I have not had pine needle tea. I have not had that. I've made really juniper tea though, from juniper berries.
Okay. All right. Okay. This is fun. This is a whole nother conversation we could have.
Yeah. It's just a lot of fun. And again, the amazing thing is there's just so much knowledge that's being lost every day as we
get lazy.
And the monocrop agriculture and on and on and on. There's a lot of reasons for it. But there's so much nutrition just sitting around free for the taking, really. And I mean, literally after a successful foraging weekend, I've got enough food for a week, salads and all that, especially if I have a successful mushroom hunt. So, cool. Chicken in the woods, things like that. And those are things I can get on those I'm comfortable with. So I do a lot of foraging, which has really been a lot of fun.
So maybe we'll see you sometime like on Survivor or one of those shows.
Yeah, I'm not.
What's that
probably
one?
Not.
It's called Alone. Have you seen that show, Alone?
Yeah, I have.
My word. Anyway.
I don't know that I'm not well, nor do I think I'd want to be.
No,
right?
no. Anyway.
But I enjoy, I just enjoy cooking and exploring, and I love learning about that stuff. And
well, it's just one more thing to add to that incredible resume of yours. So
it is what I've been blessed. That's for sure.
You are a blessed man, and you have blessed us immensely. Thank you for sharing your time with us today on Visibly Fit, and thanks for your knowledge. And this has been so much fun. Where can people find you? What's your website?
Yeah, so I have so if you want information, we do we do telehealth consultations. We've got clinicians now at Barnard Medical Center on lifestyle medicine in about 20 states. So you can go to barnardmedicalcenter.org and read about that. If you're in the DC area, you want to come see one of us, myself, give us a looks. We've also got programming around plant-based diet. A lot of that information is on Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, PCRM.org. We also have a lot of ongoing intermittent programming that we offer through PCRM around plant-based diets, which is really fabulous. We have a big conference coming up in August, which I'm actually going to be speaking at here in DC. And then if you want to follow me on Instagram, JF Loomis MD.
JF Loomis MD.
MD, Right.
All right.
Right.
Very
and, you know,
cool.
you're always welcome to hit me up on Facebook too.
Yeah, there you go.
So,
Yeah, you're always so sweet and you're so kind to just respond whenever someone has a question or whenever I reach out. So yeah, you're the real deal. You're authentic, and I know you're here to serve. So thank you so very much.
Thank you.
God bless, and we'll see you soon.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all for tuning into this episode of Visibly Fit. We will catch you next time. All right. Isn't Dr. Jim Loomis so fun? He is just a plethora of information. Like, I could probably ask him any question and he would have an answer. But I hope that it answered maybe some of your questions that maybe you've had kind of go through your mind regarding health and nutrition and maybe regarding whole food plant-based lifestyle. So hopefully it inspired you. Please share this episode with others that you know that might have these same questions. Dr. Loomis is very knowledgeable, and I believe he is great at sharing the analogies and the way he breaks it down and unpacks it so that it's understandable. So, yeah, thanks so much for tuning into this episode of Visibly Fit. Check him out on the websites that he provided, and they'll also be in the show notes. But if you are really serious about taking back control or getting control of your health, then check out either my website, wendiepett.com, or go to getvisiblyfit.com, where we can do this together. I have a course that I will walk you through, but there's coaching. You get meal plans, grocery list, exercise routines, the whole full gamut, and accountability. So let's attack this mind, body, spirit, emotions, and let's get to the root problem and stop just putting a Band-Aid on the situation. So your health matters. You matter. Let's do this. All right. Thanks so much again for tuning in to this episode of Visibly Fit, and we will catch you next time. Well, that's a wrap for today's show, so thank you so much for tuning in. I love spending this time with you. To learn more and get more free resources, just head on over to wendiepett.com, and thank you in advance for sharing this episode and this podcast, following and subscribing not only to this podcast, but finding me on social media, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, wherever you are, I'm probably there too. Until next week and our next podcast time together, make it a Visibly Fit day.